Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Wake Up Late with Dougie show. I am your host, Dougie Almeida, coming to you from Simpsonville, South Carolina, where I'm becoming more of a hick every day. It's beautiful here, survived the snow, and don't miss Florida yet. So go figure. We got a great show for you today. Great comedian, great. I call him the gentleman of comedy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome my good friend and fellow comedian, Eddie Brill.
Thank you very much. Good to see you, pal. You
Good to
know,
see
uh,
you.
yeah, it seems a little fuzzy when in here, but it looks good in the picture thing I have.
Yeah, well, what we do is the producer does it per like a little more pixelated, so we have no interference. Like we're trying to run through much,
Ah,
but it'll come out real high quality in the final product.
all right. Sounds
See,
great.
that's what I
Well, it's
love.
good to be back on the show. I remember doing it once in audio when I was outside of Letterman, like either before or after the show. Was one of the many times or few times I've done your show. I remember it being a beautiful day and just sitting outside on 53rd Street and us chatting it up.
That's right. I remember that, and I also remember the incredible experience of getting to sit in David Letterman's desk and interview my wife.
Yeah,
We got to visit and watch the David Letterman show, and we were sitting on the first level of the balcony area, I guess, the terrace or the mezzanine. I
yeah.
don't know. And everybody's walking out, and Eddie comes walking out on the stage and goes, "Dougie, come on down."
Come
And
on down.
everybody's looking at me and my wife like, "You're special." I'm like, "You got it."
Well, now they know.
Now they know. Missed those days. It's been a while, right? I mean, that had to be a fantastic run.
Yeah, it was great. It's 8 years since that happened. But yeah, I did it for 17 years. I had warmed up the Dana Carvey show, which didn't last very long. It was too smart for American television, and so they took it off. And most of the crew. I mean, you know. Bob Smigel was one of the heads of it, and Louis C.K. worked on was a writer in Colbert, and I mean, just the Dana Carvey, of course, and I mean, just a million great actors and actresses and producers and stuff. So I got to warm up that, and those guys were always good to me. And then Louis, the show got taken off. Louis went over to Letterman, started writing for Letterman, and then Letterman said, "Hey, we need a warm up guy. Do you know one?" And Louis said, "Yeah, we both me and Eddie aren't working because the Dana Carvey show's off." So I got the a 6 week trial period that lasted 17 years. It's really cool.
Baboom, baboom. That's awesome. I mean, to me, one of the things, I mean, I've been in comedy now about 15 years. And one of the things I've learned that's ultra important, aside from just being creative and working hard and all that, is making sure that when you meet great people, that you're not an asshole, and that,
Yeah,
you just,
it's a good one. Yeah,
right. And then that way, when something comes up, an opportunity comes up, people think of you, right?
yeah. Talking to one of my close friends from the days of college earlier today, we went out. It was a beautiful day in New York, shocking, and we were talking about some of the friends we know and how their egos got really big after. I mean, since they became really famous, most of them were good people, but a couple of people lost their good person status with us because they thought they were more important than they
Hmm.
really are. And it's kind of a shame because, a lot of the classic great comics of all time have always been the nicest people. I mean, we recently lost, Louis Anderson and just, the Bob Saget and, I mean, they're pretty major stars and they, were the most incredibly nice people, and they took their time to mentor young comedians, and people did that for me, and I've done that consistently for all these years. So I mean, that's the only way this thing kind of works. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of idiots and jerks in the like people who are running booking comedy clubs or TV shows, sometimes have no idea what they're doing, not because they're bad people, but they didn't have any experience in doing that, and now they're thrust in the situation. So you got to put up with a lot of that. So as comedians, we band together and we form a league of good guys, good gals.
Yeah, and that was interesting because I recently moved from South Florida to Greenville, South Carolina area, and
Yeah.
it's a newer scene. Florida has developed, especially in the last 7 to 10 years. which is a big part when I was there, obviously, from just being
Hmm.
a little scene to becoming a major scene, especially with the pandemic and a lot of California and New York comics moving down there to get work because those 2 states, the hotbeds of comedy were shut down for all intents and purposes. So you
Yeah.
had a lot of people come down there, and it's amazing, right? I mean, there's those. I guess it's true in anything. It's like I guess there's a bunch of plumbers sitting around going, "Hey, there's Jim. We like Jim. Oh, there's Bill. Bill, get the
Yeah.
fuck away from here."
Yeah.
You know what I
Bill.
mean? But there's
Yeah.
there's
Hit him
comics,
in the head with a
and I
wrench.
there's some. I mean, somebody just brought it up on our show recently about the difference maybe behind the difference between like the personalities or the let's say the in New York and in LA, where they basically their opinion was in New York it's a lot more camaraderie than there is in the LA scene. You agree with
You know,
that?
sort of. Well, again, it's in every job and in every, the guys who are, in lawyers or whatever job there is. There's always the good guys and the bad guys. The sort of geographical outlay of New York City tends to, people have to walk on the street and they don't, and they you run into people more often and there's more camaraderie. We're in LA, you're in a car and you drove a lot before you got to hang out with a whole bunch of people, and then you were off and back in your car going through traffic. And LA scene for me wasn't as incredible for best friendships, but there were some amazing comedians I got to work with and got to be a better comedian because I had to go to that, I was in that community. But then you got cities like Boston and San Francisco, just outside of New York and LA, and they are brilliant because they, have a good community where they look out for the comedians. And then you got like Denver and Seattle, and those two cities are amazing because the people who run the comedy clubs in those two cities are just, good, smart, caring bookers who know how to turn, to build a community and to help young comics. So, that new, there were idiots in LA, and I was really glad to leave LA. In New York, when you get the light, if someone doesn't know what it means, there's time to wrap it up. And if you're doing a show with 15 comics, it is even more important to wrap it up when you get the light, so that someone 12 comics down the road don't get, they get the full crowd at its peak.
Yeah.
But in LA, everyone thinks they're a big star and everyone thinks they deserve, or they're forced to, like I went to a show in LA not long, before the pandemic, and I had like a 9:45 spot, and there were three comics before me that weren't really that famous or that good, but they had sitcoms or these kind of things. And instead of the 12 to 15-minute set, they went on and on and on, and the audience was like, "All right, we're happy that we saw the guy from TV, but bring somebody else on." And so in New York, anytime someone runs the light, we go, "Oh, must be an LA comic," because they're famous for
Yeah.
not, it doesn't mean everyone in LA, but they're very famous in Los Angeles for a selfishness of not caring about the show, just caring about their career and what's best for them.
There is no bigger sin, well, aside from joke thievery, I'd imagine.
Right,
Uh,
that's the biggest.
uh, yeah, there is no than running a light. Um,
Yeah,
and that, like you said, it's not more. It's always more, especially for a headline show. Like I've been at shows where the guest spot is supposed to do 7 minutes, and
right.
they're doing like 12 or 11 or 10. You
Yeah.
know,
If they did 8, they were a bad person. They know what they're supposed to do. You get a light. The light tells you to wrap it up in a minute. Do a minute, and respect the show. Respect the comedians. Respect comedy. And once you don't respect that, well, you'll lose the respect of your community. And then some people get so famous that they feel like they can get away with it, and sometimes they do because they're famous and all that, and that's a shame. But I worked with some of the biggest names in show business throughout my life, and all of them looked out for other comedians. Joan Rivers or Don Rickles, or these kind of like superstar major league people all cared about the comics, all took their time to mentor the comics, didn't never went over, because they knew they were in a show. I mean, that's just common kindness to do that. I mean, wouldn't it be great if the whole world really cared about the community instead of just, unless if there was some kind of compassion for the industry, uh, you know, but you're not going to get that. That's not
It's
how
it's
human beings
it's
are made up.
it's crazy when you're at a show and you know somebody just told a joke and it didn't hit as hard as they wanted to, and that was their closer. And then they look and I go, here it comes. The person's gonna do another 2 minutes. They're not gonna
Right.
let and you watch them. I don't even remember the club it was, and it wouldn't matter. But somebody was
Hmm.
auditioning and they ran it, and the club owner was back there going, "This son of a bitch is never gonna work in my club." And,
Right.
like you said, like, if you're doing a 5 to 7-minute spot, basically 30 seconds to a minute is maybe the buffer, maybe, a little bit if
Hmm.
the crowd's laughing
Yeah,
really hard and you're trying to finish you know what I mean? 30 seconds, and maybe
that's
if you're doing
fine.
25 minutes, maybe a minute or 2, again, the same thing. But, but 5 minute, it's nuts. It's the
Yeah.
worst thing to do.
Don't double the time. Like if you have a joke that doesn't kill, I don't mind if you do another joke like a minute long to try to get off on a laugh. Look, that's we all want to end up, looking like we did well. Again, it's the ego of it, and there's ego in it. We know that, but just don't go on and on and on. And again, it's about disrespecting the art, the your fellow comics, and just there's no room for it. And then also,
Right.
there's a lot of people who are like, the most important job in any comedy show is the host. It's of course, the headliner's famous, and you're going to get asses in the seats, and they're going to pay a lot of money, and they're going to be excited to see Brian Regan or whatever kind of situation. But the most important person in any show is the comedy host. So a lot of comedy clubs, they make the mistake of putting the least experienced comic on as the host, and they ruin the whole show. And these are bookers who supposedly supposed to know what what's good for the show. But if you put a brand new comedian on as host, well, you are just sabotaging the show from jump. And
Yeah.
you want to give someone an opportunity who's kind of new. Well, put on a really incredible host and let that new comic go on for 5 or 7 minutes after the host has done their part of the show. In
Because
Boston,
it is.
where I started, in Boston, the headliners were the hosts. Say it was
Yeah.
Kevin Meaney. He would come out, do about 15 minutes up front, then bring on a few comics, and then close with 20, 25. Because the most important job in a comedy show for the audience to make the headliner happy and the middle acts happy or whatever, it's important to have a really good host. There was a guy who put together a show in the South, and said he wanted to give young comics opportunities. So he was not paying them, which first of all sucks because he's getting paid and he's making money. He's not paying them, but he's giving them the opportunity to host. Well, so now he's ruining the show. He's disrespecting comedy. He's disrespecting these comedians by not paying. If you love comedy and you want to help young comics, get a really good host and then give this newer comic a better opportunity to be on stage and try out your material in a crowd that's now ready to go.
Yeah, I noticed that in New York, Boston, and I heard like a lot of comics out of Canada, it's big there too, where the host and the headliner, they're headliners. I mean, when I
Yeah.
started visiting New York, the people that were hosting the shows were headliners. There were people that ran the show. And they knew how to do. There's a difference between the headline spot, right, and hosting. Like you said, as the host, you're orchestrating everything. You're trying to keep things in a nice balance and moving along. And so you have the construct in your head. So the ability to be funny and all that stuff is kind of limited because you're trying to keep a little composure into the whole thing. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
recently did a show. I recently did a show where the host did about 7 to 10 minutes in between every comic, 4 or 5 comics, and I
Yeah.
almost lost it. I was like, "What are
That's
we? What?
ego again.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's ego. If you decide to be the host and you accept that job, be the host.
yeah,
When I would run auditions for, for Letterman or for the Great American Comedy Festival, I knew that it was either going to be Vic Henley or William Stevenson as the host, because not only were they incredible hosts, the both of them, but they knew how to run a show when you're auditioning people. You don't do 5, 7 minutes in between everybody. If someone maybe does poorly in their set or ends poorly, you do a couple of minutes. But instead, you just do like a 30 seconds to a minute and bring on the next comic. It's so
yeah.
important to have a really good host. I would tell the hosts who I didn't know who were hosting shows for me when I was running auditions, I said, don't, this is not about you auditioning for me. If you want to audition for me, you could do that. I'd be happy to set it up. But this is about you hosting the show and making it good for the 10 or 12 people who are waiting to go on to audition for the show. So don't screw it up, and
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, we were kind of. I'm glad. Listen, I sent you the outline. You didn't get it. I'm glad you didn't because I'm going off the outline. I'm going
Okay,
to
good.
improvise a little bit. Um, who are some of your favorites? Like, in other words, let's start from the past because everybody asked me that. Like, who did you look up to? And to me, it was always Dangerfield, Pryor,
I just saw a
Carlin.
Dangerfield chunk on before I came on here. I just clicked on, got lost in the rabbit hole of Dangerfield. He's so amazing and so good to comedians. That there was a guy who had the Rodney Dangerfield comedy special and gave so many people opportunities and started a club in the New York City, which ran for like 50, 51 years. And he was an amazing man, funny man, but cared so much about comedy and was supportive of comics, just like Joan Rivers, one of the most supportive comics of other comics that were out there. My hero was George Carlin at first. He was the guy who I felt like growing up, it was always wordplay and it was always, that was the way my brain worked. And when I
Yeah,
saw Carlin on the Tonight Show, I was like, oh my God, that's my hero. And then, of course, I saw Richard Pryor, and then, he was such a great actor and comedian at the same time, and created characters that were real and brought you to a place that nobody else did. And also in a sense that, I can go on and on. There's Jonathan Winters, who was just inventive and funny and off the top of his head. And, Lily Tomlin and Carol Burnett, who were both like the Carol Burnett show made me cry laughing
oh
every week.
god, yeah.
Lily Tomlin, I saw her Broadway show, was great. So that group of people, that's the original first people. And then it became Chris Rock and Norm Macdonald, and the best live comic I've ever seen, other than Cosby, is Paula Poundstone. Paula
Really?
Poundstone was one of the best live comics I've ever seen, and anytime I've ever done any projects, I've always had her on it, and she always crushes, and she's brilliant. So yeah, and I can go on and on and on and on and on,
Well, who do you like
with
who
the
do you
great
like now? Who's people who are
Mark
some of the comics
Norman.
out now?
You know,
Yeah.
Mark Norman makes me laugh, and oh, this other guy who I also saw earlier today, his name just slipped my mind, but Sam Morrell makes me
Oh, I
laugh.
love
He's really,
Sam.
really
Yeah.
funny. Yeah, I'm glad I got his name in there. But yeah, those two guys make me laugh really, really hard. Joe List makes me
Yeah.
laugh. You know, there's a lot of great comics out there. There's a couple of like Maria Bamford is really hilarious, and you know, it's good. I've worked with a lot of incredible people, and some people like Eddie Pepitone makes me laugh, just because he's a funny human, and it's just as natural. He does. It doesn't seem like he puts the work in. He
Right.
just goes out
That's
there and
always
hits a home run every time.
it's
I'm
funny
sure
you
he does
mention
the
him.
work.
It's funny you mentioned Eddie Pepitone because we were talking about him. I recently worked. I was in the Comedy Zone in Fort Walton Beach this weekend. I drove seven
Right,
and a half hours from Greenville, South Carolina, and I brought a
right.
good friend, my new good friend and South Carolina friend here. I don't know if you may have heard. He's been around for David Zasloff, who used to be like a
I
musical
don't know.
director in LA and did a bunch of stuff. Very funny comic. I had him open for me, and there was a couple of comics that are like, "Holy shit, you're gonna have that guy open? You're gonna be all right." And
Yeah,
I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be ready, man. I'll be." I
yeah. It
because
makes
I read that.
what's good about having a great comic open for you. It forces you to take your game to the next level. I opened for Robert Schimmel for many years, and I would say, "Do you want me to tone it down?" Because I was very high energy, clean. He said, "No, I want you to be the most high energy, clean. That's why I'm asking you to open for me, so that when I come on, sort of dark and low and more, quote unquote X rated, that it's a great juxtaposition." So. When I used to have people open for me, I would have Brian Regan used to open for me, or Jon Stewart, or people like, Dennis Regan, Daryl Hammond. They would open for me and force me to bring my game to the next level.
Yeah, no, because the opposite of that is people would ask that a lot. They're like, would you rather somebody really not do well in front of you or somebody great? I'm like, no, I don't want to dig myself out of a hole. I'm
Right.
not a high energy comic. My opening joke, I come out and go, I'm in a good mood because I fit in this shirt. That's it. That's my opening joke, and
Right.
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I'm
There's
not
no
coming out, hey
whistles and bells.
everybody.
There's just, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Ba-la-la-la-la. When
but
I
we were talking
follow a
about
comic
Pepitone. It's
like
funny.
that, yeah, when I follow a comic who's just like a heavy metal comic, where like everything's screaming and, high high energy, and there's nothing wrong with that, but when I follow that kind of comic, I really bring the energy down all the way and I go, and I pause a lot in between. I have a rhythm that slows it down, and now I've changed the whole rhythm of the room from that guy before me. Because if I try to jump on what he's doing or she's doing, it I learned that in Vancouver at a festival, following this guy all week who was just very funny and like such high energy, and my high energy was not the same. So I'd start slow, and the crowd would all of a sudden switch gears, and then I'd bring them up to the energy that I had. It's very rhythmic. It's very mathematical. You know, music, comedy. It's all based in a lot of rhythms and equations. And this silence is as musical and as powerful as words. You know, words are only one form of communication. And one of the biggest mistakes you see is a comic or a sitcom or whatever. Word, 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 word. You know,
Yeah.
that's there's nothing. You need that foundation of the truth. You need to show some vulnerability. Have it, you know, have bravado. Have it come bite you in the ass, and you got to know to play, you know, like you go to a concert, change the subject just, but in the same subject, you go to a concert and the band comes out and they play all their hits, and you're like, yeah, yeah, and then they do their ballads, and then they play their hits. You know,
Right.
it's the same thing in a symphony when you're listening to a symphony. Same thing in comedy. You come out, boom, boom, boom. Let them know you're funny, that they could sit back and they're not worried about you, because they're more worried about you than you're worried about them. They're like, I hope this comedian's funny.
Yeah.
And once you show them that you're funny, then they could sit back, and then boom, boom,
Right.
boom, and then you have them, and now you sort of do your ballads, and then you boom, 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 good night, and you know they know
Yeah.
they've had a great time.
How true is that? Because I've made the analogy between music. I've been, I'm a musician. I sang, I was younger. I studied guitar and played the trumpet. And, you're right, because I'll watch a comic like that's a high energy comic do that for 40 minutes. And I'll be like, within 20, 25 minutes, I'm starting to go, I got a headache. Like I can't, it's just too much. And one of the
I
things, the
call it
only advice,
disco because I call it disco because it's the same note over and over and over again.
yeah. Yeah, and it's amazing because, and again, now being part of this scene here in Greenville, South Carolina, a lot of newer comics, and it feels great because I am like you. I like to help. I've always been that way. I like to bring it, as they say, pass it forward, or but you know what I
Yeah,
mean. Like you mentioned, Sam Morrell. I worked with him at Belushi's one time. I opened for him, and really nice guy. I mean, like you said, this guy's funny. I mean, this guy will write a joke right there. He's just so quick. And I did a joke, and I walked off stage, and he says, "Try this," and I tried it, and it killed. And I was like,
that's
"Oh my
great.
god," you know what I mean? And I even the next time I did it, and I recorded it, I sent him me telling the punchline, and
That's
and the
great.
great thing is just from that interaction and that not because he didn't have to do that, he didn't have to. He could have just said, "Ugh," just let me go and go off stage, But he
Right.
took the time and he did it, and
That's
and
great.
from that, it was great. When I went to once I was in the last time I was in New York, I was at Gotham and he was there and it was like, hey, it was like, oh, it just and that kind of stuff just lights you up. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, this
Yeah.
guy, especially when I watch him now, as great as he's doing, I'm like, oh man, this dude, great dude, and it's nice to help, right? It's just really nice to help.
Yeah. I love it. I've always have been. You know, I grew up in a house of a million kids. I was the oldest. Our stepfather, who was really our father to all of us, died very young. He was 37. We only knew him a short time, and I'm raising everybody. But I enjoyed it. I loved being the caretaker. I loved that job. I loved being the older brother that everyone looked up to and counted on. And then it's throughout my life and my career, I've had that opportunity to be that kind of a person, where I can, help people move their careers up or give people advice or whatever. And then also you have to learn just as much as to not always be, the
Yeah,
caretaker, to like
yeah.
listen to other folks. I remember one time one of my brothers said to me, "Look, I love you, but you're not my father. You're my brother. Be my brother."
No,
And
yeah,
I was like,
calm
"You know
down.
what? He's right." He was right, and I took that in my other life. Like I'd be happy to give a comedian a line that I thought of or make a suggestion, but I'm not going to run up to some stranger and go, "Hey, you don't know me, but
Yeah.
this is what you should do," or ever tell someone what they should do. Would you like a suggestion that I have? And they'll usually say yes, and then punch me. No, no.
That's it's great. It's funny you said that because I agree. As you were saying that, you were the older brother, you were the care provider. So that's a role that you took on, which the behavior sometimes could be habitual. Like you're just so used to doing it, and then sometimes it could be overbearing to somebody else. Like you said, it's funny
Yeah.
because like I was the youngest of four boys, but I was the only one who didn't have my head up my ass. So I was the so I was always. And then of course in my adult life I've been 32 years now as a money manager. I give people advice, so it's hard not to. It's easy to fall into that. Let me give you advice mode, where sometimes you got to go. You know what? And that's somebody gave me that discussion about don't give free advice. Like
Hmm.
you should honor what you have to say and be a little more selective with it, and just don't be just throwing it out all over the place. So I
You're
think
right.
that's key. Getting back to the music aspect, that's it. You're right, because when I put together my set structure, it is like that. Like I like to come out with a couple quick jokes, like you said. So those depending, like I want people to go, oh, I want to listen to this guy. That was funny. I got to hear this guy. Come up with a quick few ones, and then a little more of a storyline to take it in, and then a couple punch. You know what I mean? But to change it
Yeah.
up for that reason, and I always thought that way, and so um, and I think of the mentors and the people that help, and it's been great. And some of the comics today, obviously, comedy has challenges, right, with everything that's going on. This
Right.
wokeness. And it's interesting when you watch a guy like Bill Maher, who is one way, and then he starts realizing, he starts, seeing some things. And I mean, at late night, I mean, look, we're talking about late night. By the way, like I was on Jimmy Kimmel last night. It was for like five
All
seconds. I was
right.
pretty excited. And but late. I mean, late night when Trump was president. That's all. When you turned it on, that's all you heard. That's all you heard. That's all you heard. Matter of fact, some people are still
Yeah.
doing Trump jokes. The guy's not even around in a sense. Um, I mean, what do you think of late night now? Without obviously we know who's the late night
Well,
stars,
it's
but
it's completely different. I mean, Johnny Carson didn't really do a lot of political stuff. He'd make fun of Reagan, Letterman didn't really do that much political stuff. He would make fun of the idiots. It didn't matter if they were Republican or Democrat. If they were an idiot and did an idiot thing, he'd make fun of them. And people would say, well, Letterman is a Democrat, and it's like, really? How do you see that? I've never seen that. He was always an independent, and he was always a guy, equal opportunity. You're an asshole. You're going to get shit on. And but when I understand the Trump jokes. I'm a New Yorker. I know Trump better than most people. I've worked for him. He's been on Letterman. You know, we know in New York. That's why he doesn't live in New York anymore, because we all know him in New York. We know who he is. So, do a couple of jokes and then move on. But people, it was over the top. I couldn't watch it anymore. It's like, all right, like even Letterman when Clinton was having his thing, or people would do jokes about it, but then they would do jokes about other things in life. And I remember Colbert got interviewed by who did he get interviewed by? Oprah. And Oprah said, you talk a lot about Trump on the thing. Let's talk about something else. And he said, no, I want to talk about Trump. It's like, calm down. All right already.
yeah,
Whatever you feel about, just come on. Comedy is not only one thing. And to be a political comic, you got to be really good. I mean, there's only been a handful of really good, like Mort Saul, for instance, was a great political genius, or Barry Crimmins from Boston was a genius political comic. And then you have these other people trying to be these genius political comics, and they're not. And it's pretty boring. Politics sucks. It doesn't matter. Look, I grew up in Florida. I was raised in Florida. Florida has the dumbest history of the worst politicians since I was a child. Idiots and corruption, and everyone has their hand out. Democrats and Republicans. There's no difference in there. I remember Lawton Childs when I was a kid was the
yeah,
the governor of Florida. Just Florida is famous, for having the most idiotic, ridiculous politicians in the history of the United States. But I don't spend my life ever talking about them. I don't care about them. They don't run my life. I have no control over corruption. Because if we look at Northern Ireland, or look at the Middle East, or look at all this. The Whoever's in charge, they're the idiots. They're the morons. They're the egos. They're the bad people. So instead of trying to say, well, this one's better than the other one, no, there's no
yeah,
there's no better. You can't get a bill passed in America. No, we still haven't dealt in infrastructure in 30 years, maybe more. Because no one's going to let the other team win. It's like it's ridiculous. So I don't care about politics because it's not worth the agita that happens when you talk about politics. But you can make a funny joke, about someone's being an idiot. Like we had, oh, what's his face, governor in Arizona, and he was running for president, and Trump called him a coward because he was in. Why can't I think of his name? He's a very famous guy. And he
Arizona.
died not long ago. I can't remember his name. He was on our show always as a guest at Letterman, and everyone who's watching knows who I'm talking about. Letterman said, like, I don't want, if he's a prisoner of war, and I don't want, if he gets
Oh, John
captured, he's
John
not.
McCain. John McCain.
Thank you, John McCain. So McCain was a gentleman and always on Letterman and always a guest and always willing to play and always willing to do something silly. But one night he called at the show when he was scheduled to be on the show and said, "Look, I can't do the show. I got to run back to Washington D.C. There's a shitload of things." He didn't say shitload, but there's a ton of things going on in D.C. I have to cancel. And they said, "No worries. Look, you're a politician and you're a big time governor and you're on these committees. You go and we'll find a Charles Grodin or one of these kind of guests that'll come in." All of a sudden, we're taping the show, and there's McCain in the studio with Katie Couric being made up to be interviewed on her show at the time he was supposed to be on Letterman. So we caught him in the lie and videotaped it, and it was
Oh,
hilarious because
I can't
it was
remember
like,
that.
you're a politician, you're a lying cocksucker politician, and we love you, we loved having you on the show, but you lied. And then he came back on Letterman and apologized for lying, but he lied. He was a liar, and that's what politicians do. They don't, no one's going to tell you the truth. You know,
How bad is that? Like, you hear 2 things in comedy as an up and coming comic. You say, "Don't be scared to say no," right? One thing, like, if you have sometimes you say no, it helps because like, "Oh, this person's too busy to take my gig." So you've
right,
heard that, but
right,
at the same time, you also know, don't ever cancel a gig because regardless of how understanding it is, no matter what that side is, no matter how reasonable the reason is, the comedy club's gonna go, "Hmm." You
right.
know, when your name comes up again, there's you can't help but have that bias where the club owner's gonna go, "Who else can we get?" You know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah,
not that it's
right.
personal. And I mean, the late great Eric Myers was a great example. This guy was a comedy
Yeah,
bombshell, unique, to never be probably. I don't know if there'll ever be another Eric Myers. I honestly swear to God, I don't think there'll ever be one. And but this, he had demons, and sometimes he wouldn't make it to the show, or something would happen.
yeah,
And it was unfortunate because a lot of people, he had a period there. We were talking about corporations in business. We have a saying when you're in a company, work for a company, and you're a producer for the company, let's say, sales cover a multiple of sins. If you just kick ass and you're doing your job, show up at
right.
8:30, not,
Yeah,
that's
it's
okay.
if a
He's
comedian is going to sell out a 5,000 seat comedy venue, and they do it consistently, and they're 10 minutes late or they cancel, and they'll bring them back because they know there's money involved, and you know people. There's very few people are, could be understanding, but if someone's consistently an asshole or consistently not showing up, well, they might have an issue like Myers did. He had an issue, and the best thing to do is to try to get him help and not keep putting him on stage in this condition. Get him some help so that he can, understand whatever demons are going on. But people don't
Yeah,
care about giving. Not, I mean, a lot of people care. You know, all these stories we're telling, a lot of people are good, and a lot of people are funny, and a lot of people are caring. But it's like, okay, well, we have Eric Myers, and he's late, but let's get him drunk and let's forget about it. No, get him to a place where he can deal with his demons.
yeah,
But that's
it's
not what
tough.
happens. But yeah, he was a very funny guy, and he was loved. My son's a comedian. I don't know if you know that or
Mhm.
whatever, but he's been a comedian for a while. He's doing incredibly well, and he was really close with Eric, and he was devastated. I mean, I wasn't close to Eric. I just laughed at him. You know what I mean? But he was a really good guy, and it's such a shame that has about, I think it was a year ago today or yesterday or something that he
Yeah, just passed. I think
passed.
I know because a
Yeah.
friend of the show, Jen Hellman, was talking about it because she was with him
Yeah, I'm
before.
trying to
Not
get in
too
touch
long.
with Jen Hellman, by the way. If you're listening, Jen, I uh
Yeah.
I try to send you an email, it bounced back. So hey.
Let me ask you a question. What makes a joke great, Eddie?
Um, you know, Sid Caesar said, "The best jokes have truth as the foundation." And then he says, and then using language from his era, he said, then all you do is you put a little curly Q on the end of it, which means, you just take it to a different place. Jokes, the foundation of comedy is the truth. And there are no rules in comedy. That's the number one rule. There's no rules, because if there was a rule and you had to have jokes per minute, like some people think is good or whatever, then you wouldn't have Lenny Bruce, or you wouldn't have Andy Kaufman. You wouldn't have Jonathan Winters. You wouldn't have Lily Tomlin. So there's no rules. But the key really is to come basically from the truth and then skewer away from that truth. That's the foundation of most comedy. There's other comedy that's different. There's Gilbert Gottfried, who's a genius, or there's, other people who are characters like Maria Bamford, who's a genius. All these character comics, and they're different in a sense, but underlying their comedy is the truth.
Yeah.
Uh, a joke could be really, really offensive to a lot of people, but if the basic truth is on the bottom of it, well, is the foundation for that joke, then to me, it's a great joke.
I had the hardest time. It took a while to develop this joke because the joke that started the joke, the first line I wrote about this joke was I always worried about, oh, I didn't have any kids because I always thought they would put me in a nursing home. So I didn't have them. And then, and then the reason I did, because my mother had Alzheimer's and my father had Parkinson's. So it's only a matter of time before I forget when I started shaking. So, you know, it it's a funny joke, and it's something the people be like, "Ooh," they get a little like, my dad has whatever. And then, but I turned it into I basically tried the joke out. It was funny. It was work. It was hard, but eventually, because it was the truth. This is my father I was talking about, my mother, and I
Right.
brought in there, like, my dad is the reason I do comedy. He was that spirit. He was that funny person. He was the person everybody wanted around until that disease took him over 3 decades from me. And it's
Right,
right at that
and
moment,
all
right.
that is reality. That's the truth. Now, what you do with that is you have all this bravado about the thing, and here's my feeling, and it comes back, and if you can have that joke come back and bite you in the ass, all your bravado then the joke becomes funny, because that it's like if you watch Bill Burr, he's like, everybody sucks, and then all of a sudden it turns out that, yeah, I suck too. That's
Yeah.
what you have to. That's how it goes. But if you just, there's a lot of comics out there. Everybody sucks but me. Everybody sucks but me. There's nothing compelling about that. So if you're going
Right.
to talk about, Alzheimer's or something like that, I mean, you're going to piss somebody off no matter what you do. In most situations, you're going to piss somebody off. Um, there's a lot of that going on, and you can't. The line I like to say is, "I'm not here to please you." I want you to be pleased, but that's not my job. My job is not here to please you. And it sounds egotistical, but it's not. Could be, but it means that I'm going to do what I love and what I find funny. And if you find it funny, man, this is fantastic. If you don't find it
Right.
funny, I'm not here to please you. Next, like someone said to me, I don't like Dave Chappelle's comedy. I went, he's not here to please you. Turn the channel, watch another show.
That's
And
a
the
great
other
way of
part about
looking at it.
comedy and the other part about comedy is you're someone's going to do a joke, and they're going to do it, and it's going to be lame, and it's going to be racist, or it's going to be sexist, or it's going to be piss people off. But if you evolve as a human being and are able to now be a different comedian who's now evolved into someone who knows how to make that joke funny and make it more vulnerable and make it more about truth and all that, well, then I'm going to celebrate that. I'm not going to look in your past and go, 10 years ago this comedian said something racist. Well, you know what? That person grew up in a racist household and in a racist community, and that's how that person felt for a long time, until they were wrong, and they were ignorant, and
Right.
that's their environment. But if you grow up and you learn that that's not right, and you change everything, and become a better comic, a better human, then I'm going to celebrate you, and I don't give a shit what you did in the past.
Well, that
So
brings up a
everybody's bringing up. All I was going to say is everybody's bringing up the past about these certain comics, And the reality is that they're just fishing to find something in the past, maybe even out of context, that will cancel a comedian. When really, it's like, how is that comedian? You know, what are they doing now in their act? How smart is their comedy now? How brilliant is it now? That's what I care about.
Yeah. We were talking about like what people said, like obviously there's a lot of things about Joe Rogan, which has to get into the freedom of speech thing. I mean, to me, it's kind of crazy. Although I have a message every time I'm going to do any type of broadcast. If you're white, please never reference the Planet of the Apes. Just don't.
Oh yeah,
Okay, just don't. I mean,
it can be
I
done.
don't know if you watched Joe
Unless
Rogan's
you
apology.
worked at a movie theater and that was the movie that was playing,
Yeah,
and it's a joke about
yeah.
working in a movie theater.
Or you want to share a story about Charlton Heston. You know what I mean? If there's something you're going to
Yeah,
reference, but
damn
don't.
dirty apes,
I mean,
whatever
just
that
do
line
not
is.
make that fucking reference. Um, but you think of things. It's kind of even goes back to like what's happened in the last few years in our country about the Confederate statues and some of this stuff and all bringing back a lot of these things. And you're like, look, I really hope it would be really a shame if somebody judged the things I did when I was 4 years old. Expecting me to
Right.
have the wisdom and the knowledge that I have today. And
Yeah,
like you
because
said,
when you're 4 years old, your uncle might have said something, your racist uncle might have said something, and everyone laughed, and you went, "Hey, my uncle got a laugh, and I love my uncle, so now I'm going to say that." So that's why
yeah.
you don't judge that in the past.
It's hard, and I had a conversation with somebody today about that, and they're like, "Well, Joe," because he was like, "Well, Whoopi Goldberg," and but I go, "Look, the difference is Joe Rogan said something a decade or so ago, and Whoopi just said this 2 day, like a week ago." You know what I mean? So I'm going to
Yeah,
look at
and
that
even that,
comment.
but that's apples and oranges. What Whoopi did was she said something that was wrong and ignorant, and someone should say, "Hey, that was wrong and ignorant." She should say, "Look, I'm an idiot. I'm sorry," and she should have never been let go for 2 weeks. What's that about? It's bullshit. If she said something wrong, we bring it up. We all learn from it. It's a learning moment. Kids watch it, but this put her in the corner for 2 weeks is all bullshit. You know what I mean? And with
Yeah,
Rogan, I know Rogan a very long time. I was the first baseman. He was the second baseman in the softball league that we used to play in. He's a great guy. I love Joe Rogan as a human being. He's a really good person. I've known him through the years. We're not best friends or anything, but when he was young, I knew what a human being he was, and I stand behind him. I don't agree with everything he says. I think he should have, you know, done more research on the people he was bringing in to make some stuff. He admitted later that he didn't do the research and he apologized for it. Fine. Next. Okay.
right.
If I was doing a thing in my act and it was that offended somebody, then they don't have to spend, they can show me people shop with their money. And they like, so if you like those kind of jokes that I do, well, you're going to spend the money to go see me. And if you don't like the kind of jokes I do, you're going to spend the money elsewhere to go see another comic. And that's just the way it goes. There's
What?
this whole thing about, well, this person said this and this person, Howard Stern wore blackface and Jimmy Kimmel wore blackface and all these kind of things. And there was a time, it's never right to wear blackface, never right. But in those eras, people did it, and then they realized later, like Joe Rogan said the other day, he said, "Look, I looked at it, and I'm like, I'm embarrassed, and I'm appalled at who I was back then." You know, my mother was, long unfortunately passed, but she grew up in a house where there was racism in the house, and she was, as a little girl, kind of racist. And then she got older, and my sister and I got a hold of her and said, "You're an idiot." And she realized her woes and became the most she was always loving, but she just knew what her mother and father would say around the
Right.
house. And so I love that my mother evolved into this incredible woman who loved people whether they were gay or black or Chinese or whatever. you know um Same thing with what's his face, who wasn't allowed to host the Academy Awards because he did a homophobic joke 10 years ago. Well, he's one of the most incredibly nice, cool,
Oh,
funny
Kevin Hart.
guys, and
Yeah.
just Kevin Hart, the greatest. Just a funny, good human being. And he didn't get to do the Academy Awards because people in charge are morons, and they're afraid to make a statement. Just
Yeah.
tell people you're wrong. Have make it a learning experience, and then move on. Let's not put people in this fake jail.
Yeah, and yeah, I think the other thing, the reckoning that we need is people need to lighten up a bit as well. You know what I mean? It's like the old days.
Yeah.
We're almost in an era where one individual is not going to be happy unless 1,000 or 1,000,000 other people around them do things the way they want. And that's just not life. That's just not the way it works. You got to be a
No,
little more
doesn't work that
understanding, a
way.
little more intolerant. You
Right.
need to be a little more thicker skinned.
Right.
All right, we went through some of this. Let me ask you this: you fly a lot, you travel.
I
Frontier
used to.
Airlines. Oh yeah, well that's right. Frontier
Yeah.
Airlines and Spirit are merging. Two of the worst airlines in history.
Yeah.
What do you have?
Horrific.
What any type of name you'd like to give them?
Uh, you combine them like Bennifer. It's like with Spirit and Frontier. It's like do you have one?
Yeah, yeah, I'm on with you though. Like you want to compare Frontier, you want to combine somehow Frontier
Yeah.
and Spirit Airlines.
Tier,
I co-
tier.
I come up with
That's
Shit
it.
Air Airlines.
Yeah, there you go.
There
That
you go.
crossed my mind. The shit part of it. It's
Yeah.
it's just it's awful. But
All right.
I mean, they look. There's a lot of shitty businesses out there. A lot of them. As long as they land the plane safely, that's all that matters.
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing. We in our show we have something called "The News is a Joke." Since you didn't have the outline and get a chance to read through the jokes or
All
read through
right.
the stories to come up with it, we're going to do this like improv. We're going to go over the headline. Hopefully, we can come up with something for the headline, and if not, we're
All
going to go to
right.
the next one. No big deal. It's like a writers' meeting. Okay.
All right. I'm good.
Um, all right. The first story: body found along National Forest Trail in Georgia. Turns out to be a life-size doll.
Well, it was some. It was unfortunately some guy. Was went hiking with his blow up doll, and she said the wrong thing, and he left her there to die, to run out
Yeah,
of air.
exactly. One of I had a buddy of mine who was an open mic comic, and his best joke always was, he goes, "Hey, they said that they'll pay for $10,000 more. You can get one of these sex robots that talks." I'm like, he'd say, "Well, I'd pay 10,000 for her not to talk."
Yeah,
Um,
right. Or you would think that, or pay more. Like how much does it cost not to talk? 20,000.
yes, yes, of course.
Yeah,
And there's people that married. There's people that married these things. They're so realistic. There's a guy who married them.
I know. I saw a
I
guy
tried to.
who on the news that married. I got engaged once to one, but she was full of hot air,
It
and I
didn't.
just I moved on.
She wasn't very
Ladies and gentlemen of
talkative.
the court, no, it
Yeah,
blew the whole time. It
yeah.
blew.
She wasn't very outgoing, you know what I mean? I like a girl who's a little more
No,
outgoing.
but she was incoming.
Yes, and who's gonna be at that funeral? Who's gonna be at that wedding? I mean, okay, here's the groom's side, cousins, family, and all. Who's on the sex robot side? A Westinghouse refrigerator,
Yeah,
a leaf blower, a fucking Hoover
the groom
vacuum
blows up
cleaner.
the groom blows up the bride. The groom blows up the bride. I...
See, that was our first one. We should quit right there.
All right,
Now
definitely.
this is odd, but black former receptionist at Confederate Museum files a discrimination complaint.
It's just that wrote itself. There's no that joke is all by itself.
I mean, I don't understand why they were treating me this way. Um, what the fuck? Ugh.
Right.
Next story: Afghanistan's Taliban told they can't take their guns to the fun fair anymore.
Oh, where's
Ahmed
the
Mahmoud.
fun?
Yes,
Gun fair. It should be the gun fair. The unfair gun fair had no fun fair.
that's right.
I couldn't pay
What
my
do you?
fare because I couldn't take my gun fare to the unfair gun fair, fun fair.
Yes, I couldn't afford to go to the amusement park because I could not rob anybody on the way there. You
Yes.
mean I can't bring my AK-47 on the tilt-a-whirl? Um, Next story: BC woman finds naked man living in her trunk for about 3 days.
That that's why if you're driving your car, you should have extra clothing in the trunk, so that in case someone turns up naked in your car, they have some, blankets, t-shirts, shorts. You're in Florida. Look out for the people. Look out for the
Yeah,
maniacs.
and you wanna be sure you're thoughtful, so don't get, like, a certain size pant, just get those, like, just get sweatpants. Get some
Stretchies. Yeah.
sweatpants and some
Yeah.
Crocs.
That's what I do.
That's what I do in my car. I just leave some Crocs, some
Yeah.
sweatpants, and a T-shirt for any homeless person that just wants to stay in there.
Exactly.
You know
Look,
what I'm saying?
it's I don't use the trunk for anything really except, to hide homeless people. So,
Oddly enough, the woman, now has turned her trunk into a an Airbnb or a
ah,
what's the one? What's the one where you go places,
yeah,
and you stay there? Yeah. Lawmakers says, "This holy city's airport code is too gay." Well, guess what it is? You're flying to the gay airport.
yeah. Well, maybe it's gays. Like meant GACE. The gays.
Hey, when I go to that airport, do I have to be a pitcher or catcher? Um, all right, this is crazy. Ontario spent about $133,000 trying to fire employee over alleged $2.99 theft.
No, now you know why they're going out of business.
Yes.
You know, why don't you just give her 130 grand and then keep the rest, and you're all set. She'd probably
It's
quit if you gave her the 130 grand. She'd walk out. Look, they're not thinking up there in Ontario, the old capital.
Canada's different place, isn't it, Eddie? I mean, Canada's a different place. I think
Yeah,
we're safe to say.
yeah, I think so. I enjoy myself in Canada. I think the
Yeah,
comedy crowds are amazing, and some of the greatest comics in the world, like Martin Short and Jim Carrey, and on and on and on. All the people from SCTV, Eugene Levy. There's Canada's a funny place. For a long time,
absolutely.
Canada didn't allow their comics to work other clubs if they were starting out. They had to work one club, and it really fucked over Canada comedians because they couldn't, like, if you worked at this club, you couldn't work at another one. And so I understand if you're a headliner, but if you're like an open micer, you should be able to do 20 shows in a week at all the
Yeah,
different clubs around town. And Canada kind of bit themselves in the ass a little bit by their ego situation. It forced a bunch of Canadians to move to America because, although Canada's was a great comedy community, it's a shame. Again, back to the original thing we talked about, bad people in charge.
yeah.
Mommy
I
Mark.
want to. I'd like to go there to Canada to perform. Uh,
It's great,
Next story:
actually.
Texas woman accused of killing roommate by sitting on her. Oh, we have the wrong story, but that's all right. Um,
Okay.
yeah, some people like that. Um, but listen, if you're going to go some way, maybe not that bad
Yeah,
of a way to
just
go.
no, yeah. I mean, you have your beanbag chair, and you just oh, I was gonna go one place, but it's like
It's a no.
not working.
Uh, and now Ben, my producer, our last story: homeowner using flamethrower to melt snow sets his house ablaze.
No, really, that is that what happened? A
I can
guy who
see.
wants to
I can
light a
see.
cigarette with a flamethrower burns face off. You know.
Yes, that's his
Ugh.
brother. That's his
Yeah.
brother. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I could hear a guy from Shark Tank going, "This won't work. I'm out." Um,
This won't. You only hear this won't.
yeah.
Oh,
I remember there was like some sort of video that went viral a year or two ago with that where some guy was doing that. He was out in his garage just flamethrowing it, and I got to tell you, we moved to Greenville, South Carolina in May, and we were in the snow here. We had a heavy snow a few
hmm,
weeks ago, and like 6 or 7 inches. It was laying on the ground. My wife got to do her first snow angel, and that's what we call the stripper at the strip club, Snow Angel. No, I'm only kidding. She did
hey,
her. There you go. That's a joke. That's in some truth. But she got to do it. And the good thing, Eddie, is that my mother-in-law wanted to move up here with us. She was actually going to come here and stay with us for a while and to find a house. Well, after that snowfall, she's
yeah,
not going to leave
yeah.
Florida.
I know. My
Thank.
mom was born in Brooklyn. My family all born in Brooklyn, except for my youngest brothers, who all grew up in South Florida. My mom, loved Brooklyn. She talked like this when she was all the time, her whole life. She said, "Fuck every other word." My fucking son's the best fucking kid in the fucking neighborhood. Just how she used to talk. And we moved in like 1970 down to Florida, and it was paradise. Comparatively with the beaches. Hollywood, Florida beaches are clean and it's great. And then there was that one winter we went back to just visit our friends back there, and she says, "I'm not coming back."
Oh
She
yeah.
just the Florida was too. She loved the palm trees and the beaches and putting her feet in the sand and not having to wear a winter coat. But I love New York so much that I'm willing to wear a winter coat. But I'm lucky because my brother still lives in Boca Raton, so I can go visit him and his family and be close to the beach. And so you gotta have family in the right places. You need a family person who's a tech person. You need a family
Yes.
person who has a house near the water. You got to work that out with your family. You can say, "Look, you cover this, I'll cover that." I'll have a
Ex-
couch in New York if you ever want to come at Christmas.
we need family diversity and geographical allocation. Yeah, just like
Right.
just like family, you need friends. Like you need a good friend that like a DUI attorney. It's good to have a good
Yeah.
traffic law attorney friend. It's good to have friends that get baseball tickets and stuff like that. That
Very
just there's
important.
right. You got friends that take you out when they take you places and stuff. There's friends that take the blame.
Oh
When you're
yeah,
single.
that's the
Yeah.
friend you really need.
Yeah.
That's the
Who's
friend you have to be to yourself.
Yeah. Whose
That's the
lipstick
you
is
have to
that in
be
your
to yourself.
car? Yeah. Whose lipstick is that in your car? Oh, my friend Perry. He met a girl. He must was in the back seat with her. You
Yeah.
know?
Thanks, Perry. Checks in the mail.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy.
By the
Well,
way,
listen. That's all.
I know you. I know we might wrap it up or whatever, but I just want to. I'm coming to Florida for the first time in ages to do a gig, a brand new gig at the in Jupiter at the Jupiter this recreation center. It's on my website. It's on all the stuff, but it's on my Facebook page. But on March 11th, I'm coming down to Florida to do that, and I'm teaching a workshop at the West Palm Beach Improv. That's why I was trying to get in touch with Jen because she was brilliant. I did a workshop a couple of years ago at the West Palm Beach Improv. I'm doing it on Saturday, day the 12th, and you can contact me to find out about it. But Jen was amazing in it, and I would hopefully she want to do it again. But it's really fun. I've been teaching workshops around the world for over 20 years. You can't teach comedy. I don't pretend to teach comedy, and you cannot do that. But you can workshop it and get feedback from people. It's invaluable. And when you give feedback to people, you're oftentimes projecting the stuff about yourself onto other people. So it's a really
Right.
incredible thing that I'm very proud of. I'm doing that on the 12th of March. So get in touch with me. I don't know if you're going to put the emails or whatever, but I'm Eddie Comic at Instagram, at Eddie Comic at Instagram, Eddie underscore Brill at not TikTok. I'm not on TikTok yet. On you know on Quiver. No, I'm
Instagram.
on
Instagram.
yeah. Instagram is at Eddie Comic, and Twitter is Eddie underscore Brill.
There you go. I'm actually going to be in Florida. I think the week after that.
Of course, St.
Tavolino's is
Patty's Day
back.
week.
Yeah.
Oh right, yeah.
Tavolino's is back. We're supposed to have a
That guy
show
is
this.
great. Tell the owner I said, hey, he's a New Yorker. Is he still
Yeah.
around?
He's no longer the owner, by the way, Eddie.
Ah,
Yeah, he sold the place. So yeah, but Eddie's doing good. I see him every once in a while, so I'll tell him. He said hi. And we'll get you down there, of
yeah, he
course.
was a really good guy,
Yeah,
and he fed
great
us
food
well.
there.
He treated it. Yeah,
Oh
he
yeah,
treated us well. Yeah, it's like your family when you eat with Eddie at Tavolino's.
we had we had comics from New York just want to come do the gig for the food. They're like, I
Right.
just want to
Oh
come and
yeah.
eat. You know what I
Well,
mean?
the Comedy Cellar has that great restaurant above it, the Olive Tree. That you go to. There are certain, Caroline's it has this incredible menu, and they would feed the comedians off of their menu, and it was like amazing. It was like you just want to get booked because you want to eat from that incredible kitchen.
Yeah, I think every comedy club, by the way, and let's just try to make this a golden rule. If you're a
Right.
comedy club owner and you have a comic, do not charge the comics for food.
Right.
Give them their meal.
Crazy.
No 50% off. Just give them their food, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And don't say,
It's
if you have a good menu, okay, fine. Maybe don't order the elite, the chef
right.
specials.
You have the escargot and that, but there are a lot of comedy clubs that stopped feeding comedians because some comedians took advantage. Like there was a gig in the Cayman Islands that was spectacular. It was a coconuts gig, and everything was free. Everything, scuba diving, sports. Like the things out in the water with the riding those snow skis, the ski meds, or whatever you call them. I tell me
Jet
I'm a New
skis.
Yorker and not a Floridian. Jet skis, thank you. It's the Polish jets. The jet skis are coming over for the weekend, and they now you'll hear from Polish people. But everything was free, and you get a free meal every night from some of the greatest restaurants in the world. And there was this one comedian who brought a friend down there, and every night they'd order dinner for three for the two of them, and they'd leave half of it there. And the guy said, "Hey, you ordered this food, and I got to throw it out." And they were like, "Fuck you!" And like this comedian, whoever that person was, ruined it for everyone, and there were less free things afterwards. So you can't blame the club owners on everything. You'll get some comedians
Right.
who go in there, and then they'll eat a home meal and take another home meal back to their room for themselves,
Yeah.
and
It's horrible. Horrible.
that's taking it. Yeah. But don't
That's
charge the
it.
comedians for the meal.
Well, that's it. That's all we have time for here on the Wake Up Play with Dougie show. I want to thank my good friend Eddie Brill for joining us today. And if
It's
you are in
always good to see
Florida,
you.
you got it, buddy. And by the way, if you are in Florida, and go take Eddie's go do the seminar. It's fantastic. Eddie takes his time. He's not, he's the guy. You got to just sit there. The guy's a wealth of knowledge. And again, I want to thank him so much for being instrumental in my career. Very helpful a lot of times when I was starting out, and give great advice. So if you're in Florida, contact the Palm Beach Improv and get all the details on that. Reach out to Eddie, as he said. With that being said, I'm going to be in here in South Carolina for a couple of weeks. Going to be doing some local gigs here and and I will be back in Florida on March 23rd at Tavolino's with Steve Marshall, another great New York comic, and Bear Webb, very funny lady there. Great show right there. 3 headliners are going to be all there. And then Island Grill on Sunday, the 20th of March at Island Grill. Steve Marshall, myself, and Brittany Brave. For more dates, go to DougieAlmeida.com. God bless everybody. Be well, stay safe, and we'll be back next week right here at the same spot. Take care.